China, in 2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him. Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government for the totality of China. The exact status between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1939. So ever since the beginning of the 1980s, China does not want to use a war to solve this unification problem.
You don't want to use a war, but you're surrounding it with ships, drones, cyber attacks, and making lots of threats.
Each time when the separatists in Taiwan want to push the edge of the envelope, they will come across more and more demonstration of the commitment of the Chinese nation to eventually achieve peaceful reunification or otherwise.
The Defense Minister said anyone who dares to pursue independence for Taiwan will be crushed into pieces and face destruction. Sounds like a truly peaceful guy.
That's a real statement, because if the separatists really want to push the edge of the envelope with the aid of some big country, for example, which wants to use Taiwan as a proxy in its own geopolitical rivalry against China, then wait until you see what will happen. Reunification will be achieved, and China is the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council which has not yet achieved a complete reunification. You need to ask one question. Why the extremism existed mostly among the Uyghur communities? Because there are extremists among the Uyghur community who want to separate Xinjiang away from China.
Has your brother been convicted of any crime?
Supported by CIA and other Western organizations.
Okay. Rehan.
That's the real truth.
Hold on. Oh.
Good morning, Africans. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're doing fine where you are, and if you're not doing fine, please do fine where you are. Now, let's head straight to the world. In the world, we have like 8 continents. We have Africa, we have Europe, we have Asia, we have South America, North America, we have Australia, we have the Antarctica. Those are 8 continents. And today, I want us to talk about some of the few countries in the world that really, or rather by proxy, control these other 8 continents. We know that in the UN we have like the veto powers. These powers can override any other decision that has been made by the other countries which are not members of the veto. You know that China is among these. We know that USA is one of these, right? And now there's a split that is happening between these two countries. This is not news. Everyone knows that there is tension between the United States of America and China. For example, you heard that TikTok, which is a Chinese company that was developed by a Chinese company again, that is called ByteDance technology. And they're going to ban it in the United States of America. You heard that the phone company Huawei, or Huawei, like Africans we call it, Huawei, not Huawei. We don't know Huawei. Now, this company also was banned from selling in the United States of America. Why is this happening? There's tension, of course. You know, some people really find it hard when it's time for them to let go. One of these people is likened to a country like the United States of America. There was a time when the US was shining, but now the shining that it has is not as compared to the one it used to have. Right now it's sharing, and right now it's like it's fading out. You get it? And it's fading out because China is taking power. The Chinese came to Africa. The Chinese convinced Africans to be trade partners. But the United States of America, they never took us as partners. So you see, China is a country which has really struggled a lot, by the way. This is a country that was colonized by Japan, and it took itself from dust to riches. it has surpassed the United States of America with soldiers, because China is the country with the largest human population in the whole world. Yeah, and now the Chinese are trying to still make decisions. As I told you, we have 8 continents that are trying to get everywhere to spread their influence. It is like these guys are campaigning, and of course they need to have ambassadors, they need to have representatives, and one of these representatives, who is a man of higher ranking in the Chinese government, allowed himself to be interviewed by a TV company, a broadcasting station, a media company that is owned by the West. Yeah, this guy who is the interviewer has always had a serious issue. It's like he thinks that his guests are his equals. I don't know where he learned his journalism, but I want us to watch on how he interviewed this Chinese gentleman, and then I shall share with you my thoughts by the end of the video, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
Thank you so much for joining me on Head to Head this evening here in London.
Thank you for having me.
China has upped its military spending. It's expanding its nuclear arsenal. It now has the biggest navy in the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the country's military should be capable of, quote, fighting and winning wars, and told the military to focus all your energy on fighting, improve your capability to win. Victor, who do you want to fight and who do you want to win against?
First of all, the Chinese military spending is the second largest in the world, but it is only a fraction of that of the United States. And China has a very difficult geopolitical situation. China has 14 land and neighboring countries altogether, and 6 maritime nations for China. Therefore, China's defensive in nature, is not for fighting anyone except those who want to invade China or to launch a war against China. China's military spending is for peace rather than war, and war will be forced upon China, and China need to fight back.
You say it's for peace, but your neighbors don't agree. Your neighbors are pretty worried about you. You go through the list. Japan has sounded the alarm, saying your military buildup is very serious concern to them. India is worried about China on its border. And the Philippines president has warned that China is becoming a more pronounced and worrisome threat, he says. Those are the elected governments of countries representing over 1.6 billion people in Asia. This is not the United States, this is not the West, these are your Asian neighbors saying, we're worried about China.
Maybe you mentioned 3 of the neighboring countries of China. Let's talk about each of them very quickly. Japan unconditionally surrendered not only to the United States, but also to China in 1945. And if you read very carefully the unconditional surrender document that Japan signed, then you will know how Japan needs to conduct its foreign affairs as well as its military troops with China and with all those countries that Japan unconditionally surrendered for. India is a great nation, and there is a territorial dispute between China and India, but that dispute was not created by China, neither was it created by India. It was created or left behind by the British Indian government.
That's a great history lesson. But right now, China, in 2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him. Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government for the totality of China. The exact status between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1949. So ever since the beginning of the 1980s, China does not want to use a war to solve this unification problem.
You don't want to use a war, but you're surrounding it with ships, drones, cyber attacks, and making lots of threats.
Each time when the separatists in Taiwan want to push the edge of the envelope, they will come across more and more demonstration of the commitment of the Chinese nation to eventually achieve peaceful reunification or otherwise. That's the litmus test.
Your defense minister said anyone who dares to pursue independence for Taiwan will be crushed into pieces and face destruction. Sounds like a truly peaceful guy.
That's a real statement, because if the separatists really want to push the edge of the envelope with the aid of some big country, for example, which wants to use Taiwan as a proxy in its own geopolitical rivalry against China, then wait until you see what will happen. Reunification will be achieved, and China is the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council which has not yet achieved a complete reunification.
Well, I'm always amused with this phrase reunification, because if it's one China, then clearly it's not one China. Clearly you're accepting by definition if you need to reunify it. They are doing their own thing. And why this obsession with Taiwan? You are a country of 3.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification.
Even though they don't want to be part of your country. 12% of the people of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your disregard for people's views, freedoms, dignity. You say you don't care about what they think. You also said in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde, once we get the island back, we'll have to ask everyone's origins. Those who have Japanese ancestry, who you basically say can constitute 10% of the population, will have to pledge loyalty to reunification in writing, otherwise we'll have to help them leave. You're basically calling for the ethnic cleansing of 2.3 million people in Taiwan.
No, you remember back in 1945, when Japan unconditionally surrendered, a lot of people in Taiwan who originally came from Japan, they were the rulers of Taiwan at the time, they stayed behind because of the magnanimity of the Chinese nation. Now, several decades later, they account for about 10% of the local population in Taiwan. Now, if you really do your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese Chinese.
But okay. Well, but you would get rid of them. You would get rid of 2.3 million people.
No, after the reunification, everyone in Taiwan needs to make a pledge whether they acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
And if they don't make that pledge, they're out.
Those who pledge for the one China policy, they are local citizens.
By the way, you didn't say everyone. You said of Japanese descent. That is literally ethnic cleansing. You're picking people by their ethnic heritage, making them do a loyalty test. Otherwise, they have to get out of the country they've lived in.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen, you need to support the monarchy. You cannot say,
I'm standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say. No,
I just said it.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
You cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different. We are talking about China.
China is very different.
And China has one policy which is part of the constitution.
Which involves threatening people in Taiwan who don't want to be part of your country. Let's bring in our panel who are waiting to come in and join. Let's see what they think. I'm joined by Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. If you're in Taiwan today, how worried are you about a looming invasion?
I'm not in Taiwan today. I'm going to be visiting next year. I've been there 5 times in all of the great cities of Taiwan. And what I've noticed most conspicuously is that nobody I've talked to wants to rejoin or reunify with China because of their sense of freedom and their sense of self-determination. So I think that if you're going to say our sovereignty matters more than your desire for your own self-determination and freedom, then you're doing something that will not make you popular in Taiwan, and you won't win the argument for Chinese sovereignty over the island.
Martin Jakes is here with us, author of the best-selling book, When China Rules the World. Martin, you've said in the past that China should not be seen through a solely Western lens. So I agree with you, and there's issues there. But I began the show by asking Victor about Japan and India and the Philippines, separate to Taiwan, just the issues in the region. Do you think China is responsible for some of those issues, all of those issues, none of those issues?
Well, China's obviously involved inevitably in all of those issues. I think that actually, if you look at the rise of China over the last 30, 40 years. Spectacular. Biggest change we've ever seen in history, really. And inevitably, that is changing everything in the region, in the world. That doesn't, but the remarkable thing I'd say, Mehdi, about China's rise is how, you quoted the military figures and so on, but China has not fought any wars since 1979. If you compare that with America, Europe, Japan, at the same stage of development, they were extremely aggressive.
Let's talk human rights, Victor. You've called Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang province your brothers and sisters. How do you feel about the fact that at least 500,000, some say more, of your brothers and sisters are being detained in camps by the Chinese government? That's 5% of the adult Uyghur population, one of the highest imprisonment detention rates in the world.
Mehdi, the Uyghurs are a proud ethnic group, one of the 56 ethnic nationalities in China. The Uyghurs, as far as I'm concerned, are my true brothers and sisters. I know many of them. I travel to Xinjiang regularly, and I talk to many of the Uyghurs. Now, if anyone is serious about accusing China of practicing mass injustice to the Uyghurs, give me the evidence. I think
Human Rights Watch say 500,000 people detained over the years in recent years.
You keep quote Human Rights Watch, and I tell you...
Do you know where they got those numbers from?
I don't know.
Can I tell you?
I don't know.
I thought you were the expert on You've been to Xinjiang. You've spoken to Uyghurs. You never heard these numbers?
I do not know where did they get the source.
So their source is the Xinjiang High People's Procuratorate, which has published its own statistics, Xinjiang official body, which says it's convicted 540,826 people prosecuted in the region since 2017. The United Nations Office for Human Rights looked at satellite footage. They say 10 to 20% of the population. Amnesty estimates 1 million people in camps. 500,000 is a conservative number.
Mehdi, if you quote that organization, please be assured that that organization has been completely discredited for the false information they came up with.
I love this game we're playing. You give me a source, I give you a source. They're discredited. They've said falsehoods.
Mehdi,
how can we? Let me ask you a question. How many people are in detention in Xinjiang? You give me a number.
Listen. If you look at Xinjiang...
You give me a number.
If you look at... I do not have the number.
Why not?
Yeah.
Hold on. You can't say it's not 500,000 and then say you don't have a number. I have a number. I have sources. How many people do you think are detained?
Let me give you my reason.
No.
I go to Xinjiang a lot. I travel almost throughout Xinjiang. So they're your brothers and sisters. You go there a lot, but you can't tell me how many people are in detention. Listen, they are happier. They enjoy their life. They enjoy their Muslim practices and traditions. Listen.
How many people are in detention, Victor?
Mehdi, let me be philosophical.
No, don't be philosophical. Be numerical. No. How many people are in detention? You said no to 500,000. How about, okay, let's let 250,000.
Let me finish my point.
Nope. You answer the question. You can't filibuster, Victor, on this show.
If anyone
how many
promotes
people do you think
independence, they will be dealt with in
Got
law.
It. How many of them are in court? How many in detention?
A very small minority.
So you don't have a number. You say they're all happy, but you won't let in independent investigators. You won't let in journalists to go there.
Why not?
They're not allowed to go there.
I will be happy to escort you to Xinjiang.
Really?
I can make that promise.
Really?
I will speak to the Chinese government.
Here's the problem,
to
Victor.
the Chinese
embassy. I don't want to escort. I don't want minders. I want to go freely. Will you allow that?
I do not make that decision.
Oh! A moment ago, you were going to make all sorts of interruptions. Suddenly I said, let me go freely and speak to Uyghurs freely. Can I do that with no minders?
I'll be happy.
No Chinese government escort?
I will be happy to make your case.
Oh, just now you said you'd organize it. Now we're about make a case. You can't guarantee. Rehan Assad is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, international human rights lawyer. You are a Uyghur who Victor says, brothers and sisters. Your literal brother has been held in an internment camp in Xinjiang since 2016, I believe. Rehan, tell us what happened to your brother, and what is your response to Victor, to what you've heard, and what is the latest on your brother, if you don't mind sharing with us?
Yeah, my brother Akbar Assad is a prominent tech entrepreneur. In fact, your own media outlet called him a bright star in the tech world. Right before his detention, he was invited on a state gala dinner, and then he disappeared. How could you explain that?
Mehdi, again, in China, we have about 20 Muslim ethnic groups. You need to ask one question. Why the extremism existed mostly among the Uyghur communities? Because there are extremists among the Uyghur community who want to separate Xinjiang away from China.
Has your brother been convicted of any crime?
Supported by CIA and other Western organizations.
CIA. Okay. Rehan,
that's the real truth.
Hold on.
To the Kazakhs, they don't support
Has your brother been
Xinjiang
convicted
separatism?
of a crime?
According to UN, there's no trial has taken place. He just forcibly disappeared. Actually, it amounts to enforced disappearance. But according to the Chinese government, he committed a crime of inciting ethnic discrimination while he is systematically oppressed. And when I challenged that decision, because under the Chinese law, if you're committed with the alleged crime, that you have 3 years sentence, but he got 15 years. How do you justify that? Then they switch the crime. So how do you even explain this is a rule of law system? You mentioned that if people are not pro-independent, then they're fine in Xinjiang. My brother by no means is pro-independent. In fact, your media outlet, daily media, invited him to exchange information. Did he split the country when he visited Beijing? Are
you okay with the treatment of her brother?
In front of this very august body, let me make several very brief points. The real crime involved by some of the Uyghur people are agitating for Xinjiang independence. They violate the One China policy. Now, separate from that, different communities may find their own different problems which need to be sorted out in the course of law. And I hope...
But our brother's been detained for 8 years.
Well, I do not know the charge. I hope I can help you to really look at the case, at the accusation against him.
Yeah,
I hope your brother is not guilty of inciting for separatism of Xinjiang.
Briefly.
If that is the case, then let the law take its course.
Well, your media outlet called him a model citizen who is a promoter of ethnic unity in Xinjiang.
Have you been able to speak to your brother or see him?
No, not at all. For 8 years, he's forcibly disappeared. Up until last month, for the first time, my parents saw him. What kind of justice system is that? You're making a mockery
You're not just detaining them, Victor. They're being tortured. Numerous testimonies the UN has collected. Are you okay with that?
Mehdi, when you talk about torture, think about Guantanamo Bay prisons.
Oh, my word.
Rather than in Xinjiang. Xinjiang is a place of great peace and stability.
The accounts of detainees include being beaten with batons, electric batons, while strapped in a so-called tiger chair. 158 being subjected to interrogation with water poured on their faces, prolonged solitary confinement, forced to sit motionless on stools for long periods. You're okay with this? This is the proud China?
Probably you are reading the case in Iraq committed by the American soldiers.
I'm reading the UN report in August 2022 from detainees who came out of camps in Xinjiang. Your brothers and sisters, but these brothers and sisters you don't seem to give a damn about. How do you know any torture happened in Iraq out of interest?
I know.
How?
I know for sure.
How?
I talked to the Iraqi ambassador in Beijing.
Okay.
He wept in front of me.
And I'm sure Rehan's parents have wept, and you don't seem to care.
And I hope you will tell your brother, be a staunch supporter of One China policy, be a proud
I cannot
Chinese
tell him he's
Uyghur,
in prison.
She can't tell him because she can't speak to him, because you deny access, Victor.
China.
Victor, she can't speak to him. Are you going to arrange it? Are you going to arrange a visit now?
I'll be happy to help you to make a phone call.
There's a lot of promises being made here, guys. You should follow up on this afterwards.
You are all witnesses.
We are witnesses, indeed. Let me bring in Martin Jakes. Martin, when you hear people say, basically, there's no torture, everyone's making it up, there's nobody in detention, come on, that's ridiculous, is it not, Martin?
Well, I mean, I don't know all the details of the situation in Xinjiang, but clearly there's been a big problem for a long time in Xinjiang in terms of the relationship between the Uyghur and the Han. And that came to a head in 2009 when there was a demonstration and 200 people were killed by the Uyghur. And then the Chinese inflicted the same kind of damage on the Han. So this is a deep problem in my view, and it's not easily passed off. There's no other problem in China of this kind.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people consider
this is a big problem.
That's a pretty big problem.
It's a very big problem for them, yeah. But the other thing, Mehdi, I'd say, is that the point that's being made about separatism is true. That I think that the 30 million Muslims in China, the Hui is the biggest single minority. Yeah. They are completely integrated. But the problem in Xinjiang is clearly the issue of separatism.
Stephen, let me ask you this question. Victor's making a lot of promises tonight about me going to Xinjiang and Rehan going to Xinjiang and everyone's going to be fine. How safe, how okay are you with visiting China? How free do you think you are when you go to China?
When I go to China, and I haven't been for some time, I'm watched almost 24/7 There's always someone I can spot is trailing me. So I know when my hotel room is upgraded suddenly to a spacious suite, I'm now in a place which is bugged. So someone who's a mild critic and a scholarly critic like me doesn't feel safe in China. By contrast, I feel safer in Taiwan.
Victor, when you hear Stephen say he doesn't feel that safe going to China, prefers going to Taiwan, when we talk about freedom of speech, for example, in China, I live in the United States of America, where I can say that Donald Trump is a, I don't know, hypothetically, an orange-faced narcissist. I also live here in the UK, I'm British. Here you have Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, was called a pint-sized loser by a Labour politician. No one in China has that kind of freedom to talk about their government, to talk about President Xi Jinping in that way. You can't say anything like that. You wouldn't dare say anything like that because you know what will happen to you when you go home. You know what will happen to your family. That's what China is.
Mehdi, if you do anything, write anything, email or chat to your friends about taking anything action against, let's say, Prime Minister of Britain, President of the United States,
I didn't say that.
You'll be dealt with
That's
very
not what I
swiftly.
said. Victor, you're a master of straw man. That's not what I said. I said Rishi Sunak was called a pint-sized loser. Would you call Xi Jinping a pint-sized loser?
Mehdi, each country has different sensitivities. In UK...
So you're admitting you can't criticize the Chinese government?
No. You can criticize the government if you are positive in your attitude.
You can criticize the government if you're positive?
Yes.
Is that the new philosophy?
No, if you can come up with your...
You've got to come up with nice insults?
No.
What then?
Constructive advice.
Constructive advice?
For example,
oh, I'm loving
in dealing with the aging population, what should be the government do? What should this governor do?
But you can't say the president's lied. He's a liar.
No, you will be dealt with very swiftly in China. You cannot say that.
That is the most honest thing you've said tonight. Yes. Victor Gao, we're going to take a break. That's part one of Head-to-Head with our guest, Victor Gao. In part two, we'll be talking about President Xi Jinping. We'll be talking about the issue of dictatorship, and we'll hear from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall. Welcome back to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest this week is Victor Gao, former interpreter to the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, vice president of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, and an ardent promoter of the People's Republic. We're also joined by an expert panel here in London's Conway Hall and a live audience who we're going to hear from shortly. Victor, before we get to the audience, in 2019, on this very show, I asked the question, is Xi Jinping gearing up to be president for life, dictator-in-chief? I mean, he's the most powerful leader of China since Mao. He's abolished presidential term limits. He's now in his third five-year term as president. So I'll ask again tonight, is he now president for life, a true dictator?
For the record, first of all, Chinese President Xi Jinping will never be president for life. There will be a time limit. When it will be handled according to the Chinese legal system and constitution. Secondly, there is no dictator in China. Why? Because dictatorship simply doesn't work. Democracy means modernization. And how can you explain profound transformation of China over the past 45 years in China if you have dictatorship or authoritarian rule? No. Every leader in China will be put into a team, and teamwork will be much more important than individualism.
Victor. Maybe previous presidents did. Maybe Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao. Everyone knows Xi Jinping has centralized power, consolidated power, got rid of term limits. You say there's a way to get rid of him, but there isn't actually a legal way to get rid of him. He's in power for life, and he likes being a dictator. Why are we pretending?
Mehdi, allow me to remind you, the Communist Party of China, which is the ruling party of China, has a membership of up to 100 million people. Yeah. It's well structured. Every province, every state-owned enterprise, etc., will have a party cell.
There's no division or debate within the Chinese Communist Party.
Listen to me. No single person in China can dictate to a population of 1.4 billion people and 100 million membership of the Communist Party of China.
Okay, let's test that.
That's a mission impossible.
Let's test that proposition. The president won a vote last year. Won a vote. I'll put that in air quotes. Do you know the tally of last year's presidential vote in favor of Xi Jinping by the National People's Congress? Part of that structure you just advertised to us. What was the vote? Can you tell our audience here?
I think it's up to about 100%. That doesn't...
2,000 952 to 0.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
Could you not find a few people just to make it look a little even? One or two?
Mehdi, it's not surprising. It's not surprising.
2952 to 0. That's one-man rule, my friend.
In the Chinese system, everyone supports the Chinese president.
You just told us 10 seconds ago there's this huge system, a big party, one guy, and then you're like, oh no, but everyone supports him. 0 votes against him. One person out of 3,000 couldn't say, Xi Jinping, not my guy. One.
What if he is the guy for all the Communist Party of China? You never know.
Well, if that's the case, then your entire first answer is redundant, because it doesn't matter if there's 100 million people. No. They all have to follow the leader.
No, he does command huge respect among the Chinese people, as well as
you say respect, I say fear. Do you know how many names were on the ballot papers that were given in 2013? How many names were on the ballot paper when they went to choose the president? Can you tell our audience?
I think there is only one candidate.
Yeah, there were no other names. That's a real secure leader. A guy who knows he has the confidence of his people. You get to vote, but only for me, and none of you can actually vote against me.
Mehdi, we do not want to end up in a situation with 6 prime ministers in 80 years.
Yeah. So you prefer a dictatorship?
No, we prefer a system that works for the benefit of the Chinese people.
I've not said a word about what works or not. You got great economic growth.
Look at the
But you're a dictatorship.
Growth. There is no dictatorship, Mehdi.
You just admitted that there's no name on the ballot paper, no votes against him, and they all just follow him. That's a dictatorship.
Mehdi, when you have a succession
say my name multiple times, but it's a dictatorship.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
How many? What? King and queen.
When the king succeeds the queen,
yes.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
How many?
Does that make Britain not a democracy?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm a Republican, so I think we should be a full democracy and get rid of the monarchy. And I can say that here. You can't say that in China.
You cannot take any action against that.
Yes, I can, actually. I can go out on the street, I can hold up a placard and say, let's get rid of King Charles. I can create a whole protest outside Buckingham Palace. You can't do that in China. You can't even put one other person's name on a ballot paper. That's how insecure your leader is.
Mehdi, I'm a lawyer. In my capacity as a lawyer, I can give you a long list of things that you cannot do regarding the monarchy here in Britain.
I'm not debating that. I'm saying that we have an elected government. We get to choose. We get to swap 6 prime ministers, God help us. But we get to pick. Everyone in this room who's a citizen gets to pick.
Listen, you end up with your mini budget, which bankrupt the whole country.
But that's an honest answer, Victor. But Victor, I admire that, because that's an honest answer. Your answer is, it's a dictatorship that works. At least say that.
No.
No, you can't. You keep dodging. One minute you say, it's not a dictatorship. Then I show you it is. You say, but it's working. We've got growth.
Mehdi,
pick one.
Mehdi, if that is your point, I will seriously urge...
Oh, guys. Remember, I told you this gentleman is, would I say rude? Yeah, he's kind of rude. This same gentleman had an interview with the Rwandese member of parliament. I think she was the foreign affairs minister of Rwanda. And this gentleman here was not really good with speaking to these heads of state. I think this same gentleman interviewed another African head of state, and he was just speaking the way he is right now. You know, in as much as you're a journalist, you should not accuse someone, you know. Go there with an objective mindset. Go there with a mind that is there to listen to both sides. Because contrary to what we always have to know is that in as much as we have a victim and we have the perpetrator, it's always good to listen to what really caused the whole issue. But with Mehdi Hassan is always he's a Western puppet. There's no better name. Not even a name. There's no better description to show how much he is of the West, you know. Just by listening, just by talking, just by hearing someone, you get to get the whole story. You get to understand. It's not like he's trying to convince you to become one with them. No, if he's convincing you, then that's another thing. But this is an open interview. He can't really convince you with people. If he wants to convince you, he'll convince you when maybe you are having some tea, or maybe you went to his country. I think Mehdi Hassan should improve on doing interviews with these heads of state. Heads of state and government leaders are not people to joke with. We've had so many journalists disappear. They disappeared because these guys who are interviewing them, who they interview, they showed no respect. And we've heard that Khashoggi, I don't know Khashoggi. There's someone who is a journalist of Arabian descent. This guy disappeared because I think he leaked some information about the Saudi Arabian government, and he was not really friendly. And also you've heard about Putin and some journalists disappearing or some journalists going for exile. Why do such things happen? They happen because these journalists show no respect for the people they interview, and they don't take it lightly. You understand? I got some brief information that I want us to discuss, something that I noticed both the journalist Mehdi Hassan and the Chinese minister speak about, Now, first of all, we need to acknowledge that this interview was very, very embarrassing. It's embarrassing as a man, and it's embarrassment to the whole country of China and the Chinese government. To him, Mehdi thinks that China is one big obsessive country that is there just to colonize. But remember, this company that Mehdi is working for is a Western company. Mehdi is a Western puppet, and he has to work. He has to align with his master's will. That is one thing you need to know. So, according to the interview, Mehdi said that China, among other countries, is having conflicts with India. They're having conflicts with Japan. They're having conflicts with the Philippines. China has always had conflicts with its neighbors. I don't know it's because the neighbors are afraid of their muzzle, their military muzzle. I don't know that if that's the case. But there's a case I had where China was expanding its territorial waters. My friend told me this. It is normal that when a country, the shores of a country, let's say Mombasa, 150 kilometers from that shore, 150 kilometers on that water from the shore belongs to a country. That is now called a territorial water, 150 kilometers. But when you pass the 150 kilometer, now that one is called an international waters. But China is expanding. They would go ahead and do past the 150 kilometers, build some infrastructure, and then again count another 150 kilometer ahead. You see what they did? This is just an accusation that I heard. I don't have full information about it, but I heard it from a very credible source, Now, China, according to the journalist, the accusations being made on China and its neighbors, saying that China is not a good neighbor. That neighbor whom you think always have loud music, that neighbor whose kids always bother you. Now, China, according to the West, is that neighbor. The minister said that China inherited colonial disputes and enemies. Yeah, they are saying that. They are saying that Japan had some conflicts with its colonial territories, Japan colonized China. Also, we had the Americans took part in the colonization of China. And now, the Chinese are telling us that they inherited these problems. Some of the problems they are having with their neighbors are problems that they inherited from those guys. Because maybe these guys drew the boundaries bad, not what it used to be. That is one thing I can tell. And another one is obsession with Taiwan. Goodness. This one now is where I also have a problem with China. Okay, let me stop saying I have a problem, but I think it's now too much, Taiwan has always wanted to be a country on itself. And actually, there is even a chapter, there's even a booklet. You can just go to the UN library and read for yourself. It's something, I think, 1975 or something 75, something that has the number 75 case, where China has refused that Taiwan cannot become a country. So we have People's Republic of China, and then we have the Republic of China, something like that. The Chinese are calling Taiwan their own. The Taiwanese are not confirming with China as part of them. but you can see the minister is very adamant in the unification of China. He says that if China leaves, that will compromise their integrity. Their military integrity will be compromised, you know. An enemy might attack China from Taiwan. And I think this is some of the reasons that they don't want to let go of this island of Taiwan. It might be a good reason, but it's upon them to decide if they will let this country become independent or not. But I think that once they let go of Taiwan, Taiwan will become a proxy. It will become a proxy for the West, and it will be easy to attack China because now they'll be having a closer proximities. You get it? Now, one thing I noticed that this journalist was trying to say that China is one big country that is a bully, problematic, this and that. I'm sure, I'm very certain that Mehdi is also having problems with his wife in his house. Yeah. What am I to say about this? What I am to say about this is that humans, we have problems. And problems is part of us. As long as you are alive and you are living on this earth, you'll always be having problems with the people. That person who is always saying, I don't have problems with the people, that person is a liar. Mehdi is a liar. His own country, I believe, has problems. His own birth country has a problem. We know that Middle Eastern countries are never stable, right? You'll find that this country cost this to its people, this and that. So each country has a problem. Yep. The journalist is not gentle. Come on. This man is like the father of Mehdi Hassan. But he didn't show no respect at all. He was mocking him in front of people. And I don't think it's wise to mock an elderly person. It's never right. It reminds me of the story in the Bible where two kids mocked Elisha because he had a bald head. Elisha became furious and he summoned a bear from the forest. The bear came and devoured these two kids. Just because the kids laughed at his bald head, the kids were mocking him. So it's never a good thing to mock elderly people. It's never a nice thing. The journalist is not gentle. Again, I repeat. One thing that the Chinese minister said is that the CIA was involved in some of the attempts to destabilize the government of China. And this is no news. This is no news. China, the CIA has always taken part, even here in Africa, in many attempts to destabilize governments. Who really helped in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba? Who really did that? Who really helped with the Thomas Sankara? Who really helped with those guys from South Africa? Who really did this? It was the CIA that was providing intel, and they was providing intel because they had superiority. They were providing intel because they knew that this person was blocking their methods of theft. You know, if that person was an extra layer, they just want to get away with him. So they help in the assassination and then they plant their head. Now Mobutu Sese Seko, in case of Africa, was that head that was planted by the CIA so that they could easily put their hands into the gold mines and pull the uranium, the copper, the diamonds, all that out of Congo. Now with China, they became smarter. Now I don't think the West can be doing that in China. All that they can do is use people like Mehdi Hassan to do such things, you know. The journalist is with no doubt a Western puppet, a Western journalist. He has to work for his master. He needs to make his master smile. I can't blame him. He is just a Western puppet. I also can't say that whatever China is doing in China and Taiwan is right, and among those community which China is calling the Muslim community. I don't think, if there is anything bad going there, I don't think it's right, and I don't support anything. What I say is that let's stop being hypocrites. Yeah, being a hypocritical creatures is not a good thing. It always ends badly. Yeah. Now, I'm going to end the video here. If you like what I do, kindly support me on Patreon. Yeah, give some donations. And please just have a monthly subscription. I have like 30 members and many of you are just free members. Please donate something to help us bring more videos to you. Yeah, this is EFK Original Documentaries. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Remember to subscribe. Yeah, share with your loved ones as well. You don't want them to miss all this.